The president held a cabinet meeting today, coinciding with his administration's week-long first 100 days victory lap. But on this day, day 101, if you're counting at home, and I know you are, the economic numbers, well, they told a different story. President Trump's global tariffs leading the U.S. economy to shrink in the first quarter of 2025. It's the first negative quarter of economic growth here in America since the COVID-19 pandemic. The fall coming as imports rose from companies seeking to avoid new tariffs. Today, the president said, poor numbers, not his fault.
You probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January. This is the quarterly numbers.
I want to start tonight with Fin Gomez here with me at the desk and Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Ed, talk to us about the day economically for the White House, trying to frame at best it can what can only be described as disheartening first quarter growth numbers, even compared to what the Treasury Department projected earlier this week, which was a 0.4% growth, 0.4% growth, and we saw a negative print today.
Yeah, and I think the caveat with this specific bit of data is that it can be revised every month or every quarter. And so it's going to be subject to review probably a quarter from now. But either way, it's a reported negative economic growth. And because of the husbanding of resources or the anticipation and the bulk buying that's being done now in anticipation of those tariffs, it all signals this has a lot to do with what the president is up to and that companies are taking steps now to avoid further risk. He, of course, tried to spin it as suggesting this is an economy that he's inherited from President Biden. That's going to work for only a little while longer because we're now about a quarter into, more than a quarter into this presidency, basically. And, that's a line that it used to be it was President Obama's fault. Now it's President Biden's fault. We'll see how much longer he goes with that. But he continued today in this epic 2-hour, 8-minute cabinet meeting to suggest that the country is in for some short-term pain and should just eat it. At one point, for example, even suggesting that perhaps instead of having 30 dolls, little girls should have just 2 or 3 dolls. Wherever you are on dolls, that's an interesting analogy and one that can resonate widely. But the idea being that either we can buy less of them or buy better quality ones once they're being made here in the United States again. It's an interesting way to sell it. But basically, he's still continuing to insist the country needs to hang in there and get through this adjustment.
It's an interesting observation considering so much of the U.S. economy driven by consumer behavior.
Right.
Finn, I want to talk to you about Elon Musk, who was at the cabinet meeting today. There's some sound from him. Let's play that.
The American people voted for secure borders, safe cities, and sensible spending. And that's what they've gotten. A tremendous amount has been accomplished in the first 100 days. As everyone has said, it's more than has been accomplished in any administration before. Ever.
Yes, everyone around that table said more has been accomplished than any other administration. That doesn't make it true. We went through FDR's record last night. Look that back up just to compare laws to executive orders, and you'll get a pretty fair readout on that. But Elon Musk,
142 to 77 laws, 142 executive orders, yes. But during the same period of time, when FDR had 99 EOs, he also passed 77 pieces of legislation. That is not what we're seeing in the first 100 days. That's right.
It's not even close.
Sorry,
But let's talk about Elon Musk for a second, because in this first 100 days, there's been tremendous, and I think justifiable focus on what Doge has done, how rapidly it's tried to do it, whether it's followed legal procedures, how disruptive it's been, and what the actual savings been. We have some graphics on this, folks. Just bear with me for a second, and I promise Ed O'Keefe will get back to you. So Doge has said it has saved $160 billion. Its itemization on its own posting on social media, though, only covers 40% of that, which is $64 billion. All right, so let's put that in some kind of actual budgetary context. Here's how we do that. If we look at the federal budget, that's less than 2% of an annual national budget. And if you think about a family that maybe has a budget of $10,000 a month, that's like saving $200 a month. Let's compare it to the national debt. All right, the national debt is $36 trillion. That's about 0.5% of that. So a family that has $10,000 of debt, that would be like paying down $50. So a lot of noise, a lot of conversation, but in the end, Finn, not all that much savings.
It's akin to having this so-called chainsaw diplomacy or policy, right, from Doge and Elon Musk, and using more of an X-Acto knife, right? It's like, is that sort of like, in terms of this type of numbers that we're talking about here? But you're right. I mean, like the advertised savings, $160 billion. And again, if you look at that same time period.
And by the way, those graphics I just talked about, that gives them full credit for the $460 billion, whether that's true or not.
Exactly. I mean, and look, but if you compare, again, like the same time period, the first 100 days to 2024, $200 billion more, like in spending. Yes, some of this is pre-allocated spending, major. So it's not, it's a little bit, in terms of comparison, it's a little different, but it is. But if you're looking at the amount, it is a proverbial drop in the bucket. It is not this huge expected superlative type of result that was stated early on.
And O'Keefe, I promise to come back to you on the North Lawn of the White House. So as you mentioned, the president talked about, it's Biden's economy. He also refers repeatedly to the still unresolved war in Ukraine as a Biden problem that he inherited. Is there news today on a minerals deal between the United States, Trump administration, and Ukraine?
Both sides are suggesting, Major, it's close. The the president of Ukraine suggesting this afternoon again that they may do it or be able to do it by tomorrow. Both the Treasury Secretary and then the president signaled they're willing to do it this afternoon. It's an issue of what exactly is in this thing, how firm, if at all, existent are the security guarantees, or is this designed to sort of be an economic agreement that therefore, because of this president and his interests, would ensure that the United States at least remains engaged in the issue. But they could use something like this in this week, frankly, around here to demonstrate progress and forward momentum in the foreign policy space, certainly. So there is eagerness to get it done, and we'll just have to wait into tomorrow whether or not we see any signs of the details of it and whether indeed both sides are willing to sign it.
And very quickly, more commentary from the president today about conversations about trade deals, but still nothing on the table from any country.
Nothing on the table yet. Earlier this week, it was India and South Korea cited as the two that are closest. That makes sense because they are major Asian economic partners and certainly have big economic interests here in the United States, and we do over there as well.
Ed O'Keefe on the North Lawn. Fin Gomez here at the desk with me. Thanks so very much. Administration, as you heard, defending its actions despite the bad economic news. Here was senior trade advisor Peter Navaro talking to reporters earlier today.
This was the best negative print, as they say in the trade, for GDP I have ever seen in my life. And you strip out the volatility of inventories in the equation, we actually had about 3% GDP growth.
To translate that, I want to turn to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. So please, translate what Peter Navaro was driving at there.
So look, he's actually right. When you strip out all of sort of the volatility, I'm calling it right now the tariff noise, if you will, the imports and the exports, we call it core GDP. It's everything that's driving economic activity like spending, investment. That actually did increase 3%. And so what he's saying is like, look, let's take heart. The underlying economy is actually strong. But what was driving that negative piece was a over 40% surge in imports, Major. And what that tells you is the tariffs are making noise here. People, businesses, consumers, they were importing all of these products ahead of the tariff deadline. And so that's what caused that negative dip today.
And I've read, Kelly, that some CEOs have shared with the White House, some last week, some in a continuing basis, talking to various financial networks about supply chains beginning to get gummed up a bit and potential shortages of available products if, in fact, the trade standoff specifically with China, but even with other trading partners, continues deep into the summer.
That's right. I mean, you're hearing that from those retailers that went to the White House, Target, Walmart, saying, hey, we might have some empty shelves soon. You're also hearing companies that rely a lot on imports from China that they're canceling their orders. And so think about sort of play that out, back to school, holiday shopping. What does that mean for those goods we're going to buy? I think where I put it all together, right, is what happens to GDP going forward if that combined with a slowing in consumer spending? You and I talk about consumer sentiment all the time. What happens if, okay, the import problem goes away? Peter Navaro said, hey, this is just sort of a one-time thing. Maybe we resolve that, but we see slowing consumer spending and we see empty shelves where consumers can't even go and buy goods. That's where you're going to have more of a long-term problem with GDP.
And what did we hear today about inflation?
This was a bright spot. PCE inflation, this was or is the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation. Last month, it was 2.7%. Now it's 2.3%. That is progress towards the Fed's 2% goal. But, Major, there is such a disconnect on what is currently happening in the economy and what could be coming. And that's sort of the big thing. Great, inflation is moving in the right direction now, but what impact will these tariff price increases have? That's what the Fed is going to have to grapple with at the same time when you have slowing growth in the economy.
Kelly O'Grady, always great as always. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.